Brent Hoberman's the current CEO of MyDeco, his new business venture. Most people will know Brent from his time when he created lastminute.com with Martha Lane Fox and created a successful European travel business. And he's going to share with us his secrets of being a CEO. So, hi Brent, good to see you again.
You too.
We've got a number of areas to talk about, but maybe the most obvious area first of all is the web.
Sure.
A lot of focus on Web 2.0 at the moment, and I think startups have clearly led that and corporates are trying to pick it up. But can we talk a bit about Web 3.0 and what you see that as being, and the degree that how corporates could adopt Web 3.0?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Web 3.0 has been defined as elegantly yet. I think if one just means the next generation of the internet. I mean, I think people do talk about the semantic web.
That's right.
Which is, I guess, mostly what people mean by Web 3.0, which is obviously really meaning understanding the meaning of every page rather than just being a sort of Boolean stream of words.
Yeah.
I think it just means what's it really mean for corporate. It just means further acceleration of the trends that we've got today. And it just means I think the web becomes more and more important. I think within Web 3.0 perhaps one should wrap in more enhanced use of video, location-based services, screens that are meaning the internet is just all pervasive. So I think it's the opposite pervasive nature of the internet and uses that come from understanding meaning of web pages.
Right. So if you take that then as a sort of an environment, the challenge for many big corporates is they're used to sort of working in an organised way and not...
No, sure. Yeah, I think the issue is that it's about risk, and it's about the fact that in this new world you don't necessarily understand what the implications for consumers are going to be, and nobody does. Consumers in Web 2.0 anyway were definitely inventing their own uses based on technology tools, and it was the people who were able to publish great tools that were able to benefit most. And then I think for large corporates, it is that different culture in terms of risk-taking and the ability to fail, which corporates don't like, that will separate those that are able to cannibalize themselves perhaps and to explore the new opportunities. Yeah.
Because in your spare time you do some board work with bigger boards, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you sense that they get the technology, the people on these sort of boards?
Well, I'm on the Guardian board, the GMG, Guardian Media Group board, and I think it's fair to say that there you have got, as you've got the people who publish Media Guardian and the people who have a website of almost 20 million monthly uniques, they obviously see what's happening. I think, however, obviously all corporates are cautious about risk. That's calculated into the risk-reward profile of corporates. Yeah. So I think in general that statement's true.
Right. And then just going beyond the technology to sort of the startup businesses that are now happening. Could you talk a bit about your lastminute.com experience? How you went from the early stages of starting it up and the buzz and growing it through to sort of corporatizing it but keeping the momentum going. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's the real challenge, obviously, is keeping innovation as you grow and keeping that. I guess it's partly just, is it in the DNA of the business, and the DNA is dependent on who you hire early on, and also the brand identity. So the part of the brand identity was that innovation and that innovative culture. And I think within that was what we really tried to do was an attitude where it was okay to try stuff and fail. And I think that was the biggest thing, that we would experiment, launch lots of little seeds and see which ones grew, and make lots of mistakes. And I'm not sure we were as good at it as we should have been, but I think the idea is you should reward people for making smart mistakes, so long as they never do them again. And I think that's the big challenge in the corporate world. Yeah.
We were also talking to Charles Dunstan, who talked about how sort of fight processes, that we don't put needless processes in. Did you...
I think one of the things we try to do is actually to create a process to break the process, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So I think that is with innovation, is to try and say, look, there is a certain amount of money that does not need return on investment case analysis, because ROI is, as I've often quoted, saying, the enemy of innovation. Yeah. So you can't have that for that. And then there also needs to be a way of not having to go through layers of management decision making and consensus building. There needs to be some projects where you can just, one person can say, right, I know I've got a budget, don't need to sign this off, I'm going to try it. And it's a risk, and it's a small risk. I think the issue there is that the risk has to be small enough for the organisational size.
Yes.
So it really is that, to me, it's the new R&D, is actually, it's not that you're doing it in a lab, it's that you're launching stuff and you're trying it. And then I think the challenges with those launched projects, those seeds, is how do they actually benefit from the large infrastructure that the companies have, because often they can be launched too far away. Yeah. Because the issue is you need to, as Charles was saying, break away from the processes, which is protecting, for example, your core technology and not breaking the core system, because that's too expensive for anyone to risk, and no CEO, and myself included, would want to bring his site down for a few hours. So it's creating that balance of things which you can launch somewhere away from the core, but they still benefit from the core. Because if they don't benefit from the core, then then the startup will win.
One of the things we've done, Brent, for the book is we've interviewed about 150 CEOs, 3/4 of the FTSE 100, and then a lot of them out in China and India. And the thing that we noticed was that in the corporate world, there's a lot of corporate-style managers who are quite cautious and sort of can continue to sort of grow the businesses, but quite incrementally. And in India, there seems some much more missionary, entrepreneurial type CEOs. Do you think that do you think we'll make a shift in the UK going forward? I mean, do we think we need more entrepreneurial CEOs?
Well, I obviously always love to see that. I think the balance is when the CEOs who manage big companies with 5% growth don't necessarily need to be that entrepreneurial unless their industry is facing massive disruption.
Yeah.
But I think what we are going to see more and more of these big industries face massive disruption.
Yeah.
I mean, even the fund management industry, potentially, there's some really new startups that are threatening to disrupt that entire industry. So you wouldn't think of it logically that that's a potential disruption, but then maybe the guys who need to manage those need to be those sort of people who can take that industry disruption. But it is a very different mindset to the person who's brilliant at managing 10,000 people, to the person who's going to look at taking the risks and sees challenge and who loves that disruption, loves that change, and working with change, and who is not the process junkie. Because often, as you say, the people who come up, often corporate CEOs are politicians and process junkies. Yeah. So, that may not be what the CEO of certain types of industries is necessary. Yeah. And then charisma is the third thing. I think that's the key one people need, obviously, leadership. Yeah.
And the other thing is around, I think, ambition for talent. So if you take a lot of the CEOs that I deal with, they now talk about talent being key, but they don't necessarily put 25% of their diary into it, or they don't have a mindset of I really want the top X%. Do you look at it that way, or do you have a different point of view as you're creating your own business from scratch? I mean, what's your mindset about talent?
I think we're all guilty, you're right, of thinking of talking the talent game, but of spending less time on it. So I think you're absolutely right, because if you can find those super smart people, they make all the difference. I mean, I think for me it was definitely about fewer, smarter people, and I think that was and that's the benefit of the startup, is what you can do is then just attract those people who like that startup environment, who are just very smart, who like not being crowded out by people who are managers. They want to be just with very smart people. So it's that atmosphere, and I think it is that early DNA that you create that enables you to attract just very smart people who like that dynamism.
Okay, so just a question for that: if we were able to find a company that had a big company that got that sort of start fellowship at the heart of it, do you think they could do something really fantastic with a company? Maybe a company that's lost its way, but get the DNA back in and put some fresh DNA at the top.
Yeah, I think one does start to see sometimes you get top managers coming in and bringing a few really smart entrepreneurial deputy types to really shake things up. But it tends to be in a sort of turnaround situation, doesn't it? It tends to happen later than perhaps people should have done it, because it's only when they have to do it. Yeah. Because it's a risk of the chairman or whatever to bring these people in becomes a risk. Yeah. And that risk is only when everything else has failed, when the traditional slow plodding route has failed. Yeah.
And then what's your advice for people who want to have a corporate career? Do you think they should do a startup as part of it?
I think a startup is the richest experience you can have. I mean, personally, I haven't, worked in many huge organisations, except I guess, lastminute.com was relatively large at 2,000 people. But I think it is the breadth of experience, and I think it's that blending of detail. What you get in a startup is you have to be a great juggler. You have to juggle the knowledge of detail and the customer response to be able to respond very quickly, as well as the big picture strategic stuff. And I think having both those having experience in managing both of those can only be an attribute for a CEO of any big company.
Yeah, I agree. And then, when you're in a startup phase, how do you stay fresh? How do you, if you're in the really intensive phase, we've got to get funding sorted out and there's cash burn situation.
I think with freshness in a startup is because you've got so many strategic paths you can still take, always. You have growth and change, and it's the fact that you're having to deal with change on a daily basis, and you have these new strategic options that get thrown at you all the time, and the fact that normally these days I guess you tend to be trying to disrupt an industry or to change an industry, and all of these things are very motivating, and the fact that you've got cynics around. You'll always have your cynics saying it'll never happen, it'll never change, and using that as a motivating force is yet another way of doing it.
Are they your two big, I'd sense there's 2 or 3 big ones with you?